Hello, hello! Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and Sundays I do this thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month we're looking at Smoke and Mirrors and all the ways we allow ourselves to be actively fooled, starting with this month's work of fiction, Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. For the cocktail, if you Google Yesteryear cocktail, it's going to spit back an old-fashioned because... really? Old-fashioned, yesteryear, those go hand in hand. I've already made an old-fashioned, though, for, I think it was the Jefferson Davis book that I read, right? So instead I'm making a maple old-fashioned. Now, there are several recipes for maple old-fashioned. I went with a simple one from liquor.com, not sponsored, mainly because I already had all the ingredients, which made it really easy. I didn't have to make any extra trips anywhere. So for a maple old-fashioned, it is 2 ounces of dark rum, a ½ ounce of maple syrup, 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, and an orange twist for garnish. So let's do this. Now, why did I pick this book? Pundits on the right have been hating on it, saying it's a shitty job of satirizing Christian values and the trad life, trad wife style that has been all the rage on social media influencers these days. And leftists love it because, well, it's a shitty job satirizing the trad life, trad lifestyle. So why would I pick this book? It's not something I particularly care about, right? The trad trad lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. It's not something that I am particularly embroiled in myself, being neither a trad. Well, I am a wife. I guess I am a wife. But anyways, it's not something that, it's not a part of the culture war. Where the fuck did I put the lid? It's not a part of the culture war that I have actively been engaged in, right? So why would I pick this book? Well, first off, I don't let other people do my thinking for me. It's a really big one, guys. Never let other people do your thinking for me. Oh, shit. Oh, thank God. I was going to have to call the husband in, but I got it. We're good. So don't let other people do your thinking for you. Do your own thinking. It's a big deal. Second off, I do not pick my reading material based on the political opinions of the author. In nonfiction, I will judge the shit out of people for including political beliefs or opinions in a book where it has absolutely no meaning. Politics don't belong there, or if they grossly misunderstand a political issue, I will also beat the shit out of them for that. But in fiction, go for broke. All right? I don't care. What I care about, I don't care about the politics of the author. I care, can they tell a good story? That's what I care about. So is this a good story? Let me shake this up. Is this a good story? Yes. Yes, it was a good story. I enjoyed the hell out of this book. Now, you know I am usually extremely circumspect in reviewing fiction to avoid spoilers. However, since this book entered the arena and cultural zeitgeist as part of the culture wars, I'm going to spoil the fuck out of it. Mostly because that is going to explain why I, as an anarcho-capitalist, heathen libertarian centrist, loved this book. So if you don't want any spoilers, skip to this time code right here. Now, Yesteryear is the story of Natalie Heller Mills, a Christian trad wife influencer who wakes up one day to find herself transported back to 1855 and has to live the life she was preaching to her millions of Instagram followers. Now, the first spoiler, she does not actually time travel, and we will circle back to that one in the end. My local steakhouse, the Greatest Little Steakhouse in Reno, has a maple bacon old-fashioned that is actually way better than this one. And it doesn't use rum, it uses, I think, Frey Ranch whiskey. But this is okay. I mean, it's basic old-fashioned, it's fine. So she doesn't actually travel back in time. So Natalie was actually someone with a lot of promise in her life. She had a full-ride scholarship to Harvard, which means she was by no metric a dumb person. But she has some adjustment issues at college. She was originally from Idaho, was raised very Christian. Her mother raised her believing that her father left when he had an affair. And to avoid having to explain this to their church, her mother always just said he's no longer with us, implying that he died without ever actually saying he died. We later find out the mother is the one who had the affair and kicked the father out. So Natalie's family has issues with the truth. So in Harvard, Natalie finds herself a fish out of water. She doesn't get along with her extremely progressive roommate, who, for the record, the author does an outstanding job highlighting the idiocy of extreme leftist progressivism as well. as the roommate Rena experiences her own professional setbacks, which we find out about because Natalie follows her on Instagram. In a fit of loneliness, Natalie attends a Christian group on campus, and it's here that she meets Caleb Mills, a senior at Harvard and youngest son of 5 children to Senator Doug Mills from California. And they date briefly for like 6 months, quickly getting married. And with, of course, an ironclad prenup that Natalie has to sign because she is basically poor white trash marrying into a wealthy political royalty, basically. And in no time, she finds herself pregnant and dropping out of college. So she gives birth to her first baby, Clementine, at 20. And shortly after this, realizes her husband is a man-child, a stereotypical Gen Z who was spoiled by his parents and just wants to watch TV and browse the internet all day. Like his brothers treat him like the black sheep he is because they are all motivated, driven millennials, out there ready to conquer the world and take over from Gen X and boomers, and he's not. He is not. He was never expected to do much of anything, and he just wants to watch TV all day. Because he's that. Now, they spend a year living with his parents at their house in California wine country, where Natalie and her father-in-law try to come up with a solution to their Caleb problem. Doug initially wants to get Caleb a job working at a nearby winery as a manager. Natalie rejects this option. Notice how none of them discuss this with Caleb, deciding that as a good Christian woman, it's her job to make a man out of her husband. And here are 2 ironies. Because first off, if she had actually let Caleb take that job, he would have at least had some kind of agricultural experience before jumping into the ultimate denouement of the book. The other deep irony, and where we start to really understand Natalie's pathology, is at one point, while living with his parents, Caleb tells her that he wants to be a kindergarten teacher. And Natalie even acknowledges that he would be really good at that. Like, that's a dream job for him, right? He doesn't actually have to grow up. He can just talk to other people who are at his mental age all day long, and it'll be fine. But that is not good enough for Natalie. Kindergarten teacher is much too lowly for her spouse because she wants status and prestige, like the wives of the older brothers have. It is interesting to note that the only time Natalie actually takes an interest in anything her husband is doing is when it goes against the lifestyle that she wants, what she thinks will reflect well on her. So faced with being the lowly wife of an embarrassing kindergarten teacher, Natalie locates a 500-acre cattle farm in Idaho, about an hour drive from where her mother and sister live, and makes an offer, $500,000 over asking, and then approaches her father-in-law and says she's found a solution to their Caleb problem. She's going to make him a farmer. She just needs Doug to foot the startup costs, which he gladly does because having a farmer in the family is great political messaging. But not before making her sign another document that the farm would belong solely to Caleb in case of divorce. And in exchange for granting her farmer life dreams, Doug wants more grandbabies. Lots of grandbabies. The only problem here is that the marriage bed is essentially dead. They'd never had an awesome sex life. Natalie describes it as he can only get half hard at best. Of their first 6 babies, 5 were conceived via turkey baster. We later find out that Natalie is a dead lay. Basically Caleb she just lays there and has no interest in actually having sex. Like, she's so thoroughly uninterested in sex that you actually do feel kind of bad for Caleb. And there's not much in this book that makes me pity Caleb. I think he's a fucking brainless nobody NPC. But her freaking out over him watching married couples porn was one of the things that made me feel really bad for him. Like, when they were living with his parents, she sees him browsing porn and refers to him as a sex-addicted freak or something like that. But it wasn't like torture or bondage or step-siblings or amputee midget or even clown porn. It was married couples having sex porn. So he really just wanted to have sex with his wife, and she gave him nothing to work with there. So they move to the ranch in Idaho, proceed to pump out a couple more kids via turkey baster when Natalie decides to take a class online about Instagram. One of the peer feedback she gets is that she just doesn't seem likable or relatable. That lack of likability is actually a running theme throughout the book. At one point, her mother screams at her, "Why can't you just be kind?" Hoping somebody out there is picking up what I'm putting down right now, but I will tell you what I think was going on at the very end there. So Natalie practices smiling in the mirror. Big grins, right? Big grins, being likable and relatable. She practices this, and not too long after that has a post go viral. And then she is always smiling. This big macabre mockery of true happiness, always on in case someone is watching. Always smiling, but never actually meaning it. See, Caleb, who is every bit as awful as Natalie is. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I feel bad about their sex life. Like maybe if they had had an honest conversation about sex. And look, she says they were both virgins when they got married, and there is nothing wrong with that, all right? That's literally been going on for thousands of years. For a while there, that was absolutely the norm. No problem with that. But the not talking about what was wrong in their marriage, big problem. You got to be able to communicate with your spouse. And if you can't, yeah, that way lies danger and darkness. So Caleb is every bit as awful as Natalie. He doesn't actually want to be a farmer. He doesn't want to be a cattle rancher. He actually specifically said no cattle because he thought it was, he's not a vegetarian. He just doesn't want to be responsible for killing the meat. You know, meat comes from a magic happy place where no animals were actually harmed. He wants to post the pretty pictures and leave the work to the hired day laborers while he watches football and surfs the internet, because that's all he ever wanted to do. Specifically that fucked up part of the web where men's rights activists dwell. Think Andrew Tate. Think Myron Gaines. Think the idiots who preach alpha male lifestyle bullshit. Think far-right conspiracy theories. The QAnon crowd.
What are we supposed to do now? You know, I'm a follower of QAnon.
God bless South Park. Brought a lot of that shit to light. That was a part of the web I was not aware existed because I don't go there. I mean, I love conspiracy theories. I think they're fun to follow down and track, but man, QAnon is very conspiratorial. So anyways, on one of these forums, one of these QAnon forums, Manosphere forums, Caleb is talking about his traditional wife and baking bread and taking care of their babies. And on his Manosphere web pages, one of the famous ones, it's a made-up name in the book, I don't remember who it is, but he's only mentioned like once. But he's a famous one with millions of followers, comments on how she's a good traditional woman. And bam, overnight her Instagram blows up and takes off. And really, that is all it takes. One post to go viral and your life changes, man, overnight. Millions of followers, hundreds of thousands of ad revenue pouring in from Instagram, and a slowly but steadily growing YouTube page. Now, remember when I said the farm was solely in Caleb's name because of that deal with the devil she made with her father-in-law? Natalie is well aware of how tenuous this is for her because Caleb is very bad with money. He's bad at everything he does. Like I said, he can't really farm. They have a cow for pictures and their cows keep dying because he is a shit farmer. And rather than listening to the advice of actual farmers, he finds farmers who will agree with him on his Manosphere pages because he doesn't want to be told no. She immediately starts putting the Instagram funds into a private account, which Caleb quickly spots and reroutes to the business accounts for Yesteryear Farms. Natalie calls Instagram, has them split the payments, putting like 25% into a private account for her, with the rest going into the joint account, which Caleb never discovers the subterfuge, as far as I'm aware. I don't recall reading anything in the book that says that this was discovered. And this is relevant only for later. I'm going to circle back to that at the end. One of the parts that of the ending that smacked of bullshit to me, but 99% of the book was fantastic. It was just the very, very tail, like the last chapter. I was like, really? That's how you're ending it? I'll come back to it. In short order, Natalie decides she needs help. They end up hiring 2 nannies and a producer, Shannon. And 2 nannies is not unreasonable when you have 5 kids, excuse me. Producer Shannon, a snake has entered the garden. Shannon is a great producer. She makes Natalie's content really beautiful, but she definitely lied to get the position and lies at the very end. But what brings it all to a head is when the Mills family attends one of Doug's political rallies as he's gearing up for a presidential run, and Shannon freaks out about what she's seeing. You know, all the far-right manosphere, civil war is coming bullshit, and decides to start challenging some of the more bizarre conspiracies that Caleb has been spouting. Now, since Natalie basically only talks to Caleb when they're on camera, Caleb is intrigued by this new female intention. He hasn't actually spoken to a woman, like with actual conversation, in, a decade. Like, remember when I reviewed Handmaid's Tale and I said you actually kind of feel bad for the guy in it because you feel like he just wants to have some kind of a connection with the female and he can't have a real connection with his wife anymore? More of that, all right? He has an affair with Shannon. Literally saw that one coming a mile away. That was not even cleverly forecast. It was very obvious from the word go. Natalie even knew something was awry because the day after she hired Shannon, she was like, I made a mistake. I should fire her. I should fire her. But never does because Shannon makes her look good. Yet another clue to Natalie's pathology. So he has an affair with Shannon, ultimately announcing to Natalie he's in love with Shannon and moving to New York with her. Remember when I said Natalie only cares about Caleb when it's going to impact her life? There's the prenup, which she did not have a lawyer look at, the property deed, which is entirely in Caleb's name, and now she's pregnant with her sixth child. So she's looking at being a single divorced mother of 6 with no income, since the perfect Christian wife trad life is about to be yanked out from under her. So she calls her partner in crime, who is not her spouse, but should be her spouse because, that's your partner. She calls Doug. At one point, she even briefly fantasizes about what it would be like if Doug wanted to have sex with her and feels she's not opposed to the suggestion. He never suggests it because he's a politician, and man, fucking your son's daughter, your son's wife is a real bad for publicity, man. But she does fantasize about it because he's a man and Caleb is a man-child. Anyways, she calls Doug, tells him it's time for Caleb to join politics because, frankly, Caleb is never going to leave her if there's a political race on the line. Leaving the perfect bastion of Christian motherhood is not going to play well with the constituents. So he stays because, Dad wants me to join politics. What do you think? Well, let's pray on it. God says yes. Great. And then she confronts Shannon and ends up physically attacking her. And then calls Doug again because that's what you do, right? Now, Doug assumes it's just an attack of a heavily pregnant woman against the homewrecker who slept with her husband and starts prepping his PR team and lawyers like that. And as Natalie tells it, that's exactly what happened. And I actually do think that is exactly what happened because we do know that Shannon lied about a couple of other things. But Shannon cleans up real pretty. She is also from a wealthy family, which she hid. And when she goes on national news, she tells everyone there was a sexual component to it, that Natalie may be a closeted lesbian. That is the point at which Doug loses his absolute mind and says, I'd really rather Caleb would have just raped her than, that. So for the record, again, I think Shannon lied because that told a better story. And, the book I'm reading for next week, it doesn't have to be the truth. It just has to be a good story. I don't believe Natalie was a closeted lesbian. I think she was a pathological narcissist. All those things that needed to make her look good needed to reflect well on her. I think she was a pathological narcissist with a big helping side gig of borderline personality disorder. She was clearly not right in the head. She was far more concerned with how things looked than in ever being a kind and decent human being, which again is made abundantly clear not just from things Natalie says and does, but during Shannon's nationally televised interview when she starts playing clips of the things she recorded on the sly. Clips of things Natalie said that she did not know were being recorded, but reveal an awful lot about Natalie. And Natalie's mind snaps. She clocks out, man. So no actual time travel. What happened? Basically, she became convinced that if everything was truly authentic, 100% accurate, then the followers would return and they would like her again. So she starts, that's why I think narcissist, because that's all that matters to her. So she starts tearing out the performative parts of her house, the kitschy, picture-perfect kitchen, the carefully renovated Brazilian hardwood floors, the large clawfoot bathtub that's just perfect for bubble baths, right? And starts living like she's in the 19th century. Caleb realizes that he's never going to run away with Shannon and live in New York, and his family has basically written him off. He goes along with it. And because at this point, basically mutual hatred and control is the only thing the couple really have going for them. So that is a wholly healthy dynamic to be raising children in, right? And when Natalie tries to start him back out of this newly constructed, purely authentic, old-timey reality, Caleb drugs her with more of Mommy's Little Helpers, which is a prescription. We don't know what it is. It actually really is never said in the book, which I appreciate because people are idiots. They try and find it, and lithium used to be legal, It used to be one of the primary ingredients in 7-Up. Whatever it is, his mother had a never-ending supply of them to deal with her own depression, and he kept getting them for Natalie. It's never actually stated, but I do strongly suspect that Natalie starts to come out of this drug-induced haze around the time that Doug Mills gets tired of dealing with the bullshit. The money he's been throwing at the problem to keep it quiet is just no longer worth it to Doug. She wakes up like 18 years after Shannon's interview. So it's very possible Doug retired from politics at that point and said, fuck it. I mean, clearly he lost his presidential bid, but he could have still been a senator. California is not exactly known for changing their mind midstream. So with that, there's no more money to keep drugging his wife, and Natalie wakes up. 18 years of drug use, no matter how non-addictive, is going to have an effect. And she thinks she's actually in 1855. And I knew basically immediately that time travel was not a factor. Care to guess why? Because this is actually going to really... I was telling my friend about this, and she couldn't guess why until I told her, because it's really obvious when you think about it. It's funny because my friend Tia probably should have picked up on it. If she'd read the book, she'd have picked up on it too, but she was going off my secondhand telling. So before picking up books to review, I was pretty involved in historical costuming. There's your one hint. I'll give you a couple of seconds here. If she had actually time traveled, Natalie would have been wearing a corset. Because corsets were absolutely de rigueur. They were very much the bra of the day, and it didn't matter how isolated you were, you did not leave your house without putting on your corset. It was the item of clothing. It was the foundational garment that made sure everything else fit right. Doesn't matter how lumpy, shapeless, formless your dress is, you're going to wear a corset. Anyways, no time travel involved. She does eventually piece out that it's not time travel. Can't figure out what exactly is going on. The best she can come up with is that she's on some sort of twisted reality show. Fair enough. That's the reality she lives with. That's what she knows. She has 4 children she doesn't recognize. Caleb, whom she does recognize, but calls him old Caleb because he's older than the Caleb she remembers. There are no mirrors, so she has no idea that she has aged as well. Her daughter Mary is barely civil to her. Her daughter Maeve is just not right in the head. Her 2 boys, Noah and Abel, mostly ignore her while they spend their days helping with boy chores on the farm. And while she had previously been quite frigid, she is now having the best sex of her life. It turns out all they needed for a happening sex life was to grudge fuck each other nightly. There's something to be said for grudge fucking. It's not necessarily the worst thing. It's not conducive to a happy, healthy marriage. But you can get your rocks off that way. This all comes out as an elaborate fraud when Maeve gets sick. She starts burning a fever. And Mary tells Natalie how to get to a doctor's house to go for help because Caleb is basically ignoring it. He's like, she'll get over it. It's fine. Natalie stumbles upon a cabin where one of her older sons, she had 5 kids prior to. She had Clementine the first, and Jess and Junebug were her 2 youngest daughters. Then she had 2 boys in the middle, Sterling and something else. Stetson, maybe? I don't know. The boys were never in the house because they were off doing boy chores with Caleb. The girls stayed in the house with her. Yeah, anyways. One of her older sons is peeling store stickers off of vegetables. Caleb wasn't much of a farmer at all, like ever. He never grew anything. The vegetables they did grow were growing because Natalie was secretly spraying them with pesticides, which is a big fat no-no in organic farming. But that's what she was doing because it made Caleb happy, and she was trying to make her husband into a man without ever actually overseeing him. Anyways, yeah. He sets the young boys to do boy chores at the farm while he walks a mile to this cabin where his older boys are stationed, watches football with them all day, then returns with store-bought vegetables for Mary and Natalie to cook for dinner. And this has been their daily ritual for 18 years. Natalie doesn't actually quite piece out the young man peeling the sticker as her son. I mean, adrenaline. She's now realizing just how deep the fraud goes because the cabin literally has a sign over that says Manosphere, and she's like, oh, okay, great. So she runs, she takes off, and ends up circling back because she never explored the woods on her 500-acre property, ends up circling back to the farm just in time for her firstborn, Clementine, to pull into the yard in a Subaru with a court order to take custody of Mary, Noah, Abel, and Maeve, her 4 remaining children. So she had 9 children in total. And then it all comes out. She starts to actually remember things. It was well done. It really was well done. The author intertweaves past and present beautifully. Natalie ends up in prison for aggravated assault. And this is where I'm going to go into what I didn't really agree with in the ending. And the ending, understand, was only literally the last chapter. All right? The very tail end of the book, the last chapter. Everything up to this was perfection. Kept you on the edge of your seat, kept me reading. It's fucking fascinating. I've actually now read this book twice. I read it the first time in June because I bought it, and then I was like, I'm going to review that for my channel. Fuck yeah. So I had to read it again so I could get, mark out what I needed to know. And anyways. She ends up in prison for aggravated child abuse. And that actually didn't jive for me. Not that she would end up in prison. I believe I could even see she would end up in prison for child abuse. The problem I have is the author didn't do a little bit of basic research. I mean, in the book, it's for 30 years. Idaho actually caps that crime at 10 years. Even if it was running consecutively, not concurrently. Well, if it was running consecutive, not concurrent, it would have been 40 years because 1, 2, 3, 4 children, right? That were involved in this. The others, Jessa, Junebug, and the boys, everybody else, you have 5 years after your 18th birthday to actually file a claim, and they didn't. So, yeah. It would have been 40 years if it was the maximum. Idaho caps it at 10 years. Given the celebrity nature of this case, the lawyers would have been crawling out of the woodworks to defend her. I mean, even if all she had was a public defender, any half-wit, newly minted lawyer freshly added to the bar would have had her before a psychiatrist before the cell door finished locking. Doesn't matter how aggravating she is towards a psychiatrist, and she definitely hated them. Her mother and sister saw them at some point, and she mocked them for it. But any half-assed decent lawyer would have had her before a psychiatrist, and she would not have ended up with a brain-dead lawyer. Like I said, this would have been a celebrity case. The horrifying details of child abuse that come out of meth-addled trailer parks get public defenders and end up doing, the 30 years or whatever. She would have had a top-of-the-line pro bono attorney because celebrity. That celebrity lawyer would have looked at the long history, at the prenup, the property entirely in Caleb's name, the 18 years of drugging Natalie secretly, and he would have painted her entirely as the victim of a politically powerful Mills family who left her no choice. Hell, even if she hadn't had a pro bono lawyer, she was not without resources. Remember earlier when I said she was having Instagram split her payments into a private account for her and a business account for Yesteryear Farm? At one point, she mentions there was something like $80,000 in that private account. It might have been slightly less, but it was around $80,000. No one knew about it but her. And it basically sat untouched for 18 years. With accrued interest, she would have been sitting on around $500,000 when she and Caleb walked off the mountain and decided they hated each other enough to divorce. She was not without resources. There's no way she would have served 30 years. So, if you are just rejoining us to avoid the spoilers, this book was quite a good story. It was well done. Like I said, I didn't necessarily agree with the final chapter, but it was very well done. And while I'm pretty sure the author is left to center, she actually did not inject any politics into this book, not directly, which was very clever and wickedly funny to me as an anarcho-capitalist heathen libertarian centrist. Tiny, tiny spoiler, but not really that bad. I'm not giving anything away here, so don't feel like you have to skip. But I did say earlier the Mills family was from California wine country. Here's a fun fact. California has not elected a Republican senator since 1988. Which means the Mills family were Democrats. If the author had cared to name a party, if she had named him Republican, people would have called bullshit because everybody knows, literally public record, public knowledge, California has not elected a Republican senator since 1988. So if the lawyers had painted her as a victim of the Mills family, Idaho leans strongly right. Some political creature in Idaho would have turned her into a cause celeb, and there's no way she would have done jail time over this. Probably not even 1 year. To me, a lot of this book was driven a bit by an idiot plot, which I'll throw this up here if you guys don't know what that is. If Natalie and Caleb had actually spoken to each other, a lot of this would have never happened. If they had spoken to each other, if they had just communicated, if they determined their sex life was unsatisfactory and, oh my God, what do we see a counselor? Do we just divorce? But they never once actually talked to each other, which is really sad. I can't imagine spending 30 years of your life married to somebody that you never speak to. Natalie bitches at one point she didn't have a lawyer to look at the prenup. I mean, it's not like you need to have one on retainer, honey. Hell, as a Harvard student, on scholarship, they would have known she was poor. She might have been able to ask a law school for a review. It's not like Harvard doesn't have one of the best law schools in the country. I mean, I know both right and left love or loathe this book based on it bashing the trad life, trad wife style, but man, I do not see it. What I saw was Natalie was a thoroughly unlikable character with basically no redeeming qualities. If you read this book and felt offended, you might want to seek therapy yourself to determine what about this character resonates with you to offend you. She was not a likable person. There was not a kind bone in her body. She bled narcissist from like page 1, man. Especially what's funny is Burke actually includes several lines and vignettes about various traditional families who are all perfectly happy. The wife's there baking dinner for the family, the husband's off at work, the kids are playing in the yard. Perfectly traditional, perfectly rational. She's not even against Christianity, because at the end, the children who escape find a new church to join. So it's not a dig about family, it's not a dig about Christianity. It's a dig at performative Christianity. Performative trad wife. It's about the mask we all put on when we post to social media, hoping that virality will take us out of our daily grind and launch us into the stratosphere of fame.
Now, first thing we do is just Photoshop the bulges on her sides. We select the eyes, make them a nicer shape, take off any blemishes on the skin, lengthen the neck, add more to the hair, select the lips, make them fuller, take out any puffiness on the skin here, add fullness to the breast, lengthen the torso, take away that fold of skin, streamline the shoulders, put highlights in the eyes, and there.
One of the most profound quotes in the book, I actually marked this out the first time I read this book, because I was like, oh God, that is so fucking real. I don't even know what to make of that. The goal of an influencer is not to be lovable and it is not to be unbearable. It is to be both at once. In other words, addicting. That is the most real line that I have read in a very long time. It's what everybody seeks when they're seeking that fame. What's posted online is not reality. And I was left with this very strong sense of Nietzsche. He who fights monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. And that is what I got out of this book. It's not the dig that people are making it out to be. It's a cautionary tale against seeking fame for fame's sake, against living a life you were never meant to live at the expense of everything around you, at the expense of the life that you could actually live. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.